Okay, so in some good news, the government have extended the furlough scheme by a few months. So the UK scheme to pay wages of workers on leave because of the coronavirus will be extended till October. So I think it was meant to end in July. And so Sunak confirmed that employees will continue to receive 80% of their monthly wages up to £2,500. But he said the government will ask companies to start sharing the cost of the scheme from August. So that's when things will get dicey, because if companies say no, if the government start giving 60% of someone's salary, then I think 60% of the minimum wage is classed as being in poverty wages, essentially, and so it'll be a bit dicey there. So I wouldn't be surprised if the government starts saying I will pay 65% or 61%, is above the poverty line. But you have to give credit to Sunak, because we could be doing what the US is doing, which is I think it was a $1,200 check that was meant to last about 3 months or so. A quarter of the workforce, so 7.5 million people are now covered by the scheme. It's cost around 14 billion a month, so it's very expensive. But at the same time, a lot of that money will go back into the economy. And I'll get into that in a few minutes. I don't have any official numbers here, but that's how economics typically works. The chances that from August the scheme will continue for all sectors and regions of the country, but greater flexibility to support transition back to work. So essentially they're going to start pushing people back into work, as Johnson has done recently. Employers currently using the scheme will be able to bring furloughed employees back part-time. Mr Sunak will attempt to slow the cost of the taxpayer of the subsidy scheme, but the full details are still to be worked out, so he's still got a few months to figure out things, but he really does need to hurry up. However, sources have told the BBC Treasury still expects to be paying more than half the cost between August and October. Later on Tuesday, in an interview with BBC, Mr Sunak said the number of job losses breaks my heart, because it makes the government look bad. That's why I'm working day and night to limit the amount of job losses. Mr Sunak told the Commons, "I'm extending the scheme because I won't give up on people who rely on it." I find that hard to believe, given his ideological party and his leanings. But our message today is simple. We stood behind Britain's workers and businesses, maybe not businesses so much, who came into crisis, and we'll stand behind them as they come through the other side. There have been growing concerns about the cost of the scheme, and last week Mr Sunak said it could not continue in its current form. However, he was under pressure to announce changes to avoid a so-called cliff edge, in which employees begin mass redundancy. So he's got to come up with something soon to avoid I think it's an October deadline. So he's got until July, I'd say, to figure things out. The Chancellor rejected the suggestion that some people might get addicted to furlough if it was extended. Those people are idiots. I think most people would rather be at work. You'd have 20% more money. You'd actually be doing something during your day. Like for the first month or two, I think it's been fine. But once you get hit month 3, 4, and 5, it's going to ruin sleeping patterns. People are going to have nothing to do with their day. It's going to be difficult. That's why you got queues up for B&Q and stuff. People trying to do house projects, but I doubt they're bothering to do much. Any company seeking to cut more than 100 jobs must run a 45-day consultation, meaning the 18th of March was the last day employees could start the process before the furlough scheme ended in June. So that's a good thing. That's going to impact a lot of big businesses. The Chancellor rejected apologies if you can hear my mum in the background, she's hella loud. The Chancellor rejected suggestions that some people might get addicted to furlough if it was extended. So here he's saying that nobody wants to be on furlough, because they believe in the dignity of their work. I don't think most people care about the dignity of their work. Go to work, provides families. It's not their fault the businesses have been asked to close, and he's right there. I agree with him there. It's not their fault the business has been asked to close. Wherever you work, whatever industry you work in, if your business has been asked to close because of the coronavirus, then that's not on you. That's really by the government. But at the same time, the government doing what's better for people, which is something you can't really say a lot about the government. So Shadow Chancellor Annalise Dodds said she broadly welcomed the changes, saying at least we're moving in the right direction. But she said the big elephant in the room is over what the government's employer contribution will involve, adding that the more critical point is any changes to the scheme must not result in a spike in unemployment, and she's right there. So despite the extension to the furlough scheme, Patrick Langmay said it's still unlikely to stop him making people redundant from his mother's Ivy Bay park at Padstow. So look, if he's furloughing people and then once the deadline comes he has to let people go because he can't afford them, that's fair enough. But if he starts letting people go now, that's scumbag behaviour, because they can still get the furlough money even though he doesn't need them. He has furloughed staff and has still have 9 staff working with him. The handful of staff he would usually employ seasonally, he's had to let go. He should really have furloughed them. There is no income at huge cost, he says. There's no cost for you to furlough them. I don't know what he's talking about. I'm worried about how we as employers are going to make contributions through August, September and October. That's something the government's going to have to figure out if the government says business have to pay 10%, that's when you get mass layoffs. I've already started briefing my team that there will have to be redundancies, he says. He reckons 4 or 5 jobs may have to go depending on how long the lockdown lasts. Dealing with redundancies is horrible, he says, adding, it's really not a nice time to be running a business. So there's no silver bullet. Business is largely welcome the extension. The TEC also a fan of this would be a relief to millions, which they're right about. So we've got some analysis from Faisal Islam. Reports of the demise of the furlough scheme have been somewhat exaggerated. It was never going to be scrapped, especially after the Bank of England stressed the scheme's importance of recovery. And so it's true, because if people don't have money, you can't afford to pay your mortgage, your rent, pay for food. What happens then? The economy tanks completely. You're asking for a disaster there. You're asking for a Great Depression. Over a quarter of the jobs are now paid for by the taxpayer, potentially for 8 months. After that, the level of subsidy from the taxpayer will be lower, with the employers expected to pay a contribution by August. The scheme could look quite similar to longer-standing wage subsidy schemes in continental Europe. The cost of the scheme today is already over 10 billion. The extension will be tens of billions more, but difficult to put a precise number on this given the lack of detail on the employer contribution. So he's right there, given the fact that we haven't been given a lot of analysis or any detail about how much businesses are expected to subsidise. It's not going to happen. Expensive, yes, but what is the cost of letting unemployment skyrocket? As without an extension, many businesses would have begun 45-day redundancy consultations this week. So again, 100% agree with him. What is the cost of letting mass unemployment happen? If people can't pay their mortgages, then banks are going to go. Banks are going to struggle. Then you're talking about 2008. Are you going to bail out banks? When you haven't even bailed out people at that point? So it depends how you look at things. The question is how many businesses will still see this as some sort of bridge to normality, where furloughed staff can be phased back into their old jobs. Unfortunately, some industries which will not return to normal have already started to fire staff. This announcement buys workers more time. So if you are furloughed, it's a good chance to look for another job if that's possible. But at the same time, we all just have to hope this thing goes back to normal. And so had the government not started furloughing people, doing the furlough scheme and helping people financially, then we could have been looking to a situation closer to in the US, where in LA you have a food bank that stretched a mile long. Used to a food bank that stretched a mile long. So if we just watch this video quickly. So this is in Los Angeles. I'll just full screen it.
It's one of our drive-through distributions where we have families, many who have been impacted by layoffs or furloughs or had their hours cut back. Part of the reason for doing these distributions is to try to take some pressure off our agency network, food pantries and other organizations that are also seeing a big spike in the demand for food assistance.
And so, look, if we didn't have the furlough scheme in, we could be looking at a situation similar to this, where you already have people going to food banks. Let's not get twisted now, and they're still struggling. But you would have many more people going to food banks, and it would be a disaster situation. So we're lucky we've avoided a situation being this bad. But at the same time, if things don't go back to normal soon, then I wonder how long the government will keep furloughing people, especially because every decision they make with relieving the quarantine and travel restrictions and stuff like that, what that means is the pandemic will go on longer within the country, and therefore more people will stay furloughed because the businesses won't open back up. Unless the government risks it all and just says businesses cannot open back up, and you're risking a massive second, maybe a huge third wave. And so look, I have to give some credit to Rishi Sunak, to be honest, because we could have followed the strategy the US followed, which is bail out big businesses and minor amounts of checks, direct payments to people. So shouts out to you, Sunak. You still get a 4 out of 10 from me on the economic stuff. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.